Hey, welcome back to Guard Bros Field Desk. I have for you Chapter 3 of the Veil Rider Book 4, Strength of Spirit. Comment down below, like and subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, have a look at the coffee. Let's get into it. Chapter 3. The Village Within the Woods. Despite the wishes of Yule and his final words before everyone set out, he was pretty sure someone looking through the veil itself could see his battalion snaking their way down the snow-lined, slushy road north. Yule, needing to identify this mishmash of units bundled into one, decided to call it the 2nd Division's 1st Cab, though the humans made the nickname Yule's Bastard stick nearly as soon as they agreed on it. Yule figured this was due to the fact that nearly every unit had a platoon present, and was in fact a bastard child of Cosmoline Company. Even more of an eyesore to Yule was that each platoon brought their own banner, and the color stood out against the snow like a long line of carnival beacons. Not even a day's worth of travel was done before word got out, and once they broke camp the following morning, the traveling stalls and mobile merchants were waiting some miles down the road. Yule was driving his own wagon, Alavara happily sitting beside him and bundled up in her coat, when he saw the long line of merchants and rolled his eyes. He leaned backwards, reaching out and shaking Specialist Ryozo's shoulder. "Tell everyone not to stop for these people. If they want to buy anything, make the little merchants run," Yule said, then leaned away from the Blue Oni. Alavara chuckled from beside him, leaning back against the rest of the long bench seat.
You are so mean sometimes.
"I only say that because I recognize honest Nyla over there," Yule said, pointing to a figure who was already waving jauntily and whirling around her top hat. Alavara squinted at the woman.
Honest Nyla. I thought you threw her in jail not even last month.
It didn't stick, apparently, Yule murmured with a chuckle. Nyla was a brim-touch that sported backwards curling ram horns and had hair as orange as a sunrise and eyes that clashed in green. She had been arrested multiple times for being in the possession of Veil Rider-made weapons, but she never seemed to be able to keep her nose out of trouble. Yule also didn't like how she always got her hands on human relics, and he even wondered whose hat she had stolen. Word echoed down the line, and once the merchants were aware the long formation of troops would not be stopping, they jumped to the challenge. Weaving through horses and wagons, they still harked their wares, anything from food, wine, beer, trinkets, and ammunition made by questionable alchemists. Honest Nyla was not outdone, kicking out what appeared to be a long plank from the top of her wagon and began stripping off her long winter coat, making sure to show off how tightly fitting her Old West-style clothes were. From her plank she continued to yell out in her salesman voice, offering magazines, magical tomes of dubious nature, and even what Yule saw to be a rhythm toy from the 1990s. When she saw Yule, she made sure to smartly drop and hang from her plank upside down by her knees, her long orange hair billowing in the cold breeze.
"Warlord Yule, can I perhaps interest you or your lovely wife in some freshly enchanted fuel cocks? Fresh from the north."
"No, you may not," Yule called out, still slowly closing the distance to the hanging brim-touched. "I notice you are shopping with Carly's Secret." Alavara snickered along with Nyla. Carly's Secret was a female clothing brand that gained popularity after Carly wiggled secrets away from Gremlin, made a Veil Rider named Sarifa model for some of the articles of clothing, and formed a mini mercantile empire for herself. Yule, of course, was speaking of the fact Nyla's breasts were defying gravity as she hung upside down, and knew from the many times Alavara went shopping that those bras were not cheap. Nyla held out her arms, almost as if trying to embrace Yule upside down.
"Business has been booming, Warlord. One could say I'm suffering from success the same way your wife suffers from unending beauty." Ow!
Yule responded by reaching up and giving her a smart slap on her forehead, in which she cackled with laughter along with the soldiers riding or marching past. The day you stop getting arrested is the day I buy from you. Yule said over his shoulder, while beside him Alavara seemed to be hiding her face despite the pleased smile on her lips.
You could be nicer to her, you know. She's trying to forge a life for herself while staying on the cutting edge of market goods.
Alavara chided Yule, then smiled to herself as she shifted closer to him while feeling the slight tickle from her own fur-lined bra, state-of-the-art and made for the cold weather traveling. Yule just hummed in response, and she gave him a loud peck on the cheek to make him laugh. Chikily was bought in by a meat venter, sprinting off the wagon and returning with a wing claw full of meat skewers. Yethis fell victim to an alchemist peddling potions, while McKnight ended up buying several bottles of wine, tucking them into a rucksack for safekeeping. When the long troop line of first cab made it all the way past the merchants, plenty of pockets were lighter of pay, while the merchants themselves now sped off either south or north, buying more wares or getting ready for another run on the road. Midskip, Bell, and Sapphire played host to the first cab, the inns swelling with soldiers while the locals happily rented out their barns and haylofts to sleep troopers. Wherever first cab went, people were more than ready to receive them, and coinage flowed freely. Yule knew it was going to take a fair bit of money feeding the horses, and when rations ran out, the soldiers themselves. He always kept a wary eye on a borrowed strong carriage as they traveled, never letting it too far out of sight. It was a beefy thing, and he made sure a sharpshooter and a machine gunner were on its large steel roof at all times. The going was slow, and Yule was tired of it by the 7th day, squinting out angrily into the rising sun from the seat of his wagon. Chikily, Alavara, and the rest of the occupants of his wagon appeared to be quite chipper despite the blistering cold weather and occasional camping, but Yule had to admit he had become accustomed to his bed over the wintry months. More missed was his constant reach to information, and he was receiving missives far later than he would have on base, the Harpy messengers having to fly far and long out of their way to deliver him his letters. One such Harpy messenger seemed quite reluctant to land that morning, the Owl Harpy hovering above the wagon for a few moments before landing. Owl Harpies were becoming a norm the further north they went, as they could better withstand the cold temperatures while flying. The Owl Harpy quickly handed Yule the letters and took back off, not wanting to be a part of the presumed rage that Yule was about to generate. Yule was so incensed that Alavara had to take over guiding the horses with the reins, Yule ripping apart letters and cursing fluidly in English. Someone had put the wrong fuel into the staged vehicles of Valhalla Hill, and all their gas tanks were being flushed in order to not ruin the already expensive engines. This meant that Yule was going to have zero supplies coming his way like he thought he would, and he felt a pulse in his temple at the thought of what got wasted going into those fuel tanks. Second was the plants used for their fuel were not taking well to being planted by hand, and were struggling to bounce back from the cold, icy months, meaning he was going to be low on fuel for likely half of the already long year. Third was that Pack Rat, a human veil rider with a penchant for monstrous creatures, managed to get himself mauled to death during his direwolf program, having become complacent and believing the young female he was training was broke. The female direwolf ravaged Pack Rat so fiercely that he was found in pieces around her holding kennel, and she had to be gunned down in order to retrieve his remains, as this direwolf had already mauled 5 other staff. She had been spared due to Pack Rat believing in the process, and none of them were sad to see her go in the end. Yule began to angrily fold and shred the letters until they were nothing but confetti, tossing the remnants over his shoulder to be marched and stomped into the mud by his troopers. Yule brooded and grumbled in his throat for nearly 10 miles, all while Alavara kept her face a controlled mask and simply patted him on the shoulder. First Leg was the final town to reach, and they didn't make it there until the 10th day of travel. Yule bought a room and crashed down onto the sheets with a growl. First Leg was still rudimentary and local, which meant no pipes for hot water, no baths, and certainly no toilets. Naturally, everyone but the humans were used to this, but Alavara made sure to help wash Yule with the buckets of hot water drawn from the kitchens of the large inn. Yule, seeking distraction to temper his mood, took a good long while to wash Alavara. Not that she minded in the least. First cab did not stay long in first leg, just long enough to refill water barrels, canteens, and scarper any rations they could. The journey from here to the border of the Aranani Highlands was another week of slugging it through the mud, and Yule was quietly wishing he had just risked a flight on a Huey, or even just trying to make the run on an actual motor vehicle. He, of course, knew that would have been folly, as the orcs had invaded so far east that they actually occupied a lot of the towns that were part of the restway system along the old main road. Instead, the road had been recut even further east, leading up towards the town of Heartwood, which lay in the Wheaton region. Worse was that Yule knew full damn well he was not going to get on his way unmolested, and was certain he was going to catch orc bandits as soon as he crossed into the highlands. The first leg into the 2-week journey went on with little to do besides camping on the side of the road or slushing through the snow. Yule slowly began to get his groove back with camping again, though his tent was quite a filled space now. Before he had left first leg, he bought a larger tent intended to be a command area of sorts, allowing space for both himself, Alavara, a stove, and a small meeting area for his NCOs. Instead, due to the cold, his tent was now occupied by himself, Alavara, Chikily, Yethis, Mackey, Chicks, Wulf, Specialist Riozo, First Sergeant Erinda Caine, along with all of their gear they sought to keep warm. What was once a quiet tent was a sound chamber of snoring bodies around a crackling iron stove, and it was now that Yule understood that Alavara was an absolute vacuum of body heat. No matter how hard he tried, Alavara clung to him like a startled cat from within their thick ground blankets, drooling on his shoulder and sucking up any warmth he managed to generate. Things began to become odd within that tent the further north they traveled, until one night Yule awoke to find Chikily snuggled up near his head, Yethis on the opposite side of him, wrapped in her own blankets and tucked in close to his side, Mackey snuggled up with Alavara, and at his feet Erinda, Caine, and Riozo were tucked in tight against them all. Yule leaned up to blearily look around and found that every occupant of the tent was dog-piled around him and the stove barely lit. Even Chicks was snoring away, hugging Yethis around the hips with the elf's hair sucked into her lips. Wulf, thankfully, was just hugging the stove as per usual. Yule took a minute to crawl out of the warm blankets, toss some wood into the stove, then find his place amongst a throng of bodies, sighing out in quiet reservation as the dreaming Chikily started chewing on his hair, and Alavara tucked her hand past the waist of his fleece-lined pajama bottoms. Not even that area of warmth was safe from her, apparently. He hoped she would behave herself, or else this tent was going to get a lot more awkward. When Yule woke up the next morning, he had to blow Chikily's hair out of his face as the sparrow harpy had completely cuddled up to Yule's head like a hound, bending around his skull and snoring into his ear. Riozo had ended up nearly in between Yule's knees, breathing lightly up to the top of the tent while Erinda Caine snarled her nose as she still dreamed, clutching Yule's foot. Alavara was nestled into the crook of Yule's neck, smiling as she slept. But Yule noticed there was another hand where it should not have been, and very slowly removed said hand of Yethis from his pajama pocket. He made doubly sure to avoid a fight by stealthily grabbing an extra pillow and tucking it in between them, creating a wall to at least make sure Alavara didn't wake up and instantly flip her selector switch from safe to homicide. Chicks awoke slightly, saw what was going on, and pulled Yethis close to her in their spoon to create more space. She then gave Yule a sleepy wink before closing her eyes again. Yule lay there awake for an hour, watching light slowly crawl up across the fabric wall of the tent, then twitched his foot, jabbing Erinda Caine in her temple. The dark yellow Oni jerked awake with a snort, looking around with sleepy eyes to see Yule glaring down at her. The first sergeant let go of Yule's foot like it was on fire, and Yule switched his gaze down to Specialist Riozo. She knew the gaze meant, "Get this guy fucking off of me," and quietly rolled backwards, grabbing Ryozo by his blue feet and swiftly pulling him out from between Yule's knees. Erinda Caine looked at Yule in a gaze that said,
"Let's not make a big deal out of this, it was cold,"
and settled Ryozo by the long ash stove. Yule looked around to McKnight, and after lifting the blanket a smidge, saw why Alavara was smiling so happily in her sleep. McKnight was not only tightly spooning Alavara, but had an entire hand cupping one of her large breasts. He rolled his eyes, then reached over and pinched McKnight on the knuckle. McKnight flinched her hand back with a hiss and opened her eyes, which quickly widened when she breathed in Alavara's hair and saw Yule narrowing his eyes at her from over Alavara's shoulder. She grinned sheepishly, then quietly shrimp-scooted backwards, taking her blankets with her. Yule took off his blanket, threw it over Alavara and Yethis, made sure Chikily was tucked in warmly, then got up, brushing his loose hair back over his ears and quietly clearing his throat as he stepped over towards his clothes chest. Erinda Caine started, but buttoned up when Yule held his finger to his lips and grabbed his uniform pants. Judging from the many vacant looks and polite conversations around the camp, it became clear to Yule that it had been rather cold last night, and everyone had done what they had to do to stay warm. Yule knew that it was extremely cold still, but had been reluctant to allow open fires that weren't in stoves. They were extremely close to Orc country, and smoke was a dead giveaway as to where they were. Fire meant more guards, and the possibility of them being ambushed rising sharply. At the same time, he couldn't let his men freeze, so he pulled First Sergeant Erinda Caine aside once she was dressed. "Top," Yule said, pulling her towards the edge of the road that looked out over the frozen tall grass prairie.
"I told you it was just cold. People gravitate towards heat."
Erinda Caine chided, folding her arms angrily as she presumed a talking to was coming.
"I didn't mean anything by it, but you exude heat like a furnace."
Yule pinched his lips, then reached up and caught Erinda Caine's earlobe between his finger and thumb. "I thought I told you that never happened."
"Ow, stop! I'm sorry!"
Erinda Caine howled, shrugging her shoulders as she hissed out angrily. Yule released her, then jabbed a finger over his shoulder. "Further north we go, the more we're going to need fires and such to keep the troops warm. According to the intelligence lads, we're crossing into Orc country within a few days, depending on how fast we're clipping through this snow."
"And you want to know the risks involved,"
Erinda Caine said, rubbing at her ear irritably.
"I'm not sure why you're so gun-shy about it. We have a lot of troops with us. Bandits attacking us would be nothing but clear suicide with these numbers. The most we have to worry about is maybe scattered rifle fire, but more than likely they'll just have bows or slings."
"I don't believe they'll be attacking us for our goods," Yule murmured, crossing his arms. "We have a lot of humans with us, as well as the finest platoons from nearly all of our units. Rommel is also with us, and I saw both Bruda and Aklamon had snuck in as well. Taking us out here would cripple Cosmoline Company." Erinda Caine chuckled, holding out her scarred, yellow hands out to the frozen, snowy plain in front of them.
"Yule, it's just orcs. Even if they mounted a major offensive on us, they would be going against wagons of crack troopers and the heaviest warcasters in Cosmoline Company, not to mention our mortars and other assorted weapons."
"Not according to Gremlin," Yule said flatly, staring out into the snow. "Orcs have been getting weapons and vehicles from the Fey forces, including a few Humvees. Not to mention they're bankrolling the Orcs paying the Longclaw gnolls to perform as irregulars. I also got a visit from Crinja that's been bothering me for a while."
"A visit from Crinja?"
Erinda Caine said, turning to Yule with wide eyes that then narrowed.
"What did she say?"
Yule was quiet for a moment, then uncrossed his arms, instead tucking them into his jacket pockets. "They know I'm heading north, just never knew when or where. They do, however, know there's only one road we can take, and our only hope is that they have been dragging their feet." Erinda Caine sighed out through her nose, her lips pulled down to a thoughtful frown as she tapped her bottom lip with a finger.
"We do have some orc renegades in our ranks, and I can probably ask around see if we can scoop up any Longclaws ourselves."
How do they like paint? Yule asked her, motioning for her to walk with him as he idly stepped down the slushy road.
In hard goods mostly, but sometimes gold. They're a tribalistic rustic Knoll clan. Makes the Whitefeathers look like educated city slicks in comparison.
Erinda Caine said, resting her hand on one of her large white prayer beads as she walked.
I'd wager we could skip a small amount with the promise of advanced goods, maybe some armour. They aren't too keen on a lot of things except for food and weapons, but I am willing to wager you are not keen yourself on giving rifles to a bunch of forest savages.
Yule nodded. Have some of the lone wanderers and a few of the orc troopers take a wagon out with some goods. See if we can get a small squad of them to sniff out the enemy.
Yes, sir.
Erinda Caine said, giving him a smart salute before jogging away through the slush. Yule ran his hand down his face with a rasp of cold flesh, then sighed out a cloud of steam, looking out across the snowy prairie with tired eyes. He sat there for a long moment, then spoke out a curse softly to the air in his mother tongue. He reached deep into his jacket to his uniform and pulled out the small piece of paper from his pocket, and it felt like a decade since that slight, mousy man had given it to him before he went through the veil. He remembered the words even as he touched it. Resist at all costs. Keep the world free. To this day he still wondered why he had been given the message, or even what it truly meant, but he still felt like it was his true mission.
Touching that paper again, ain't ya?
Chick said in English as she trudged up behind him, her trusty custom HK-417 sniper rifle across her chest as usual. Yule ran his thumb across the paper with a smile, unfolding it with his fingers. You watch me too much.
You're always up to something.
Chick said with a pop of a bubble, then smiled at him with her bright teeth as the morning sun caught her blonde hair.
Means I always have to keep an eye on you. Good thing too, or else there would have been a cat fight this morning.
Apparently, I leak all the heat from my body and others wish to absorb it, Yule said, holding out the well-stained and rolled paper out so Chicks could see it. What do you think of this, Chicks? Chicks squinted her eyes at it.
Is that what it says? Who gave you that?
Don't know. It was some random guy a few hours before we stepped through. I keep thinking back to him in something... I don't know why, but I think he was Fae. Yule said quietly, folding the paper back closed with his thumb again. Something about him just makes me wonder. Chicks shifted her shoulder, watching Yule tuck the paper back into his chest pocket, and she knew there were the patches of the fallen in there as well.
Do you think it was some kind of fate trick then? Make you resist and fight in order to look like the bad guy? A pretty Fae thing to do if you ask me. Then again, we have Fae fighting on our side now, so I'm not sure.
Can't say I know, Chicks. Yule said with a sigh, buttoning his coat back shut. Sometimes I feel as if I'm leading these people to their doom. Then I read that stupid little paper and I wonder if I'm doing the right thing after all. Chicks popped another bubble, chewed a few times, then shrugged her shoulders with a rustle from her coat.
Can't say I know either, Yule. But I know I feel better on this side than the other. We all know how the old war went. What the Fae did, and the locals marched beside us with the kind of fatal zeal we are used to. The best we can do is just keep our mission in mind as we go forward.
Yule pressed his lips together in thought, then tucked his hands into his pockets. Yeah, suppose you're right. The town surprised Yule as much as it did everyone else, and even the older troopers who had joined in from the local military units were not expecting a town along this trade road. The main road was, of course, cut off by orcs as they had pushed in through the plains to the south of Wheaton, and this far newer road was instead slowly being cut to the east. This town was on no maps, and Yule stood up, signaling to his senior NCOs to dismount the rest of First Cab. A Centaur NCO cantered up to the wagon, and Yule turned to her.
Warlord, our forward patrols have reported that there's a substantial town ahead, and looks brand new,
she said, holding her fist to her chest in greeting and salute. Yule nodded, then pointed out towards the trees. Take your infantry out into a wide flanking movement to scout out the area. Make sure we're not going to get ambushed up here. The centauress nodded and took off with a kick of her hooves, packed snow flying into the air behind her as she unshouldered her rifle. Yule turned around in his wagon, cupping his hands around his mouth as he yelled, "Banners out!"
Banners out!
Erinda, Caine bellowed, and the dismounted infantry all started forming up their platoons, their guidon bearers quickly taking their place at the front of the formation.
Form up and look pretty! We're aiming for good first impressions. Verma, get that fucking spoon out your mouth.
You're going to march into that town with your banners waving, are you?
Alavara stood up to Yule, raising a sarcastic eyebrow to him. Yule shrugged. I mean, gotta make a good first impression, right?
You make all the good impressions you want. I'm staying in the wagon.
Alavara chuckled while Chikily nodded behind her.
Ground all cold. Chikily stay in wagon too.
Count me in as well.
Mackey said with chattering teeth, but found herself soon angrily marching behind Yule as he led his first cab down the road and through the snow. The town, as the sign stated, was called Limstory and was impressively new as far as towns went. The buildings themselves didn't even look more than a few months old, and the five inns didn't even have any smoke stains on the wood framing. The innkeeper to the Green Limb, an older Valley Elf man well into his 60s, stepped out the front door of his inn and yawned, pulling his long pipe from his coat pocket. He was about to light it when something fluttering in the morning light caught his eye and he turned, squinting out past the trees to the roadway. When the several dozen waving banners came into focus, he let out a strangled cry of alarm and took off down the street. Zarin Filk, the owner of the Glowing Hearth Inn, saw the Valley Elf man panting down the street in his run and stepped out of her own front doors, the Adorn just tying up her curling mane of orange hair.
Grewin, what are you running down the street for?
Zarin called out, placing her hands on her hips as some of her other patrons poked their heads out the front double doors as well.
You're looking like a right madman this morning.
Zarin was a hard-to-impress Adorned, having survived longer than most living this close to the orcs, and the room keys tied within the holes in her horns jangled in the wind. Crewin Dew turned and looked over his shoulder, pointing with his pipe stem.
Banners, Zarin. Banners are coming down the road.
Banners, eh?
Zarin said under her breath and took a few more steps out onto her far larger front porch, looking down the road and just only spying a single guttering yellow banner.
Who is flying a banner all the way over here?
What's all the noise for, Zarin?
A halfling woman called out from across the road, poking her head out of her apothecary. She still had her blonde hair wrapped in a towel, having gotten ash in it and having to wash it out.
What's Jude running down the street for?
Says he sees banners, Pally.
Zarin called back, but her eyes narrowed as she spied a lot more banners through the trees now.
And I see them myself. Not from any noble or kingdom I recognize. There's a lot of them, actually. Is an army coming this way?
Crewin got to the center of the sleepy little town and rustled his hands around in the snow, trying to find the mallet used to ring the warning bell. It took him a minute of both finding it and kicking it loose from the frozen ground, but gave the ice-covered bell a hard whack with a mallet. The sound was dullened by the amount of snow and ice, but Crewin kept on striking it until enough of the stuff had fallen away. With a mighty swing, a mournful, sullen bong echoed out from the center of the town, and heads snapped towards the bell from within homes. What is that? Yule asked Mackey from over his shoulder, knowing better than to ask the other humans that jogged up to join him. Mackey shivered audibly, her arms tightly wrapped around her despite her heavy winter coat.
Warning bell. Let's the town know to be on alert.
I don't want to frighten them. Let's sit here for a moment until they get their bearings, Yule said, and the humans around him nodded in agreement. Mackey, however, wailed, sniffing pitifully as the cold wind cut across her face.
Sit here, in the open? Ugh! Can't we wait by the wagon?
Guard Captain Jot, a humorless dwarf if there ever was such a thing, pulled down his spyglass and grumbled in his throat. Around him, nearly 20 villagers and all the shop owners waited, hands in pockets or tucked warmly into hand muffs.
Why do you think, Jot?
Zarin said, tapping her booted foot impatiently and wearing just a light winter dress.
Why are they waiting out there? If it was a royal army, they would have started blaring trumpets and marched through. If it were the enemy, we'd all be dead by now.
Pearlie, wearing a coat nearly as thick as her hair, wringed her hands in obvious worry.
Are they invading? I thought the war was just going to stay in the south. What would they want with our little town anyway?
Nay, not invading. Not what the rumors are, Jot murmured, and the heavy steps of the town elderman crunched behind him. Jot turned on his heavy leather boots, nodding to the far taller stagling. Good morning, Elderman Roich. Roich was an older stagling, but still much into his prime, his head bearing both the woven plate draping of his station and his modest rack of horns. Staglings, much akin to the centaurs, were a race of mixed body. Their humanoid portions were that of the brim-touched, hearkening back to their ancestors before they were blessed with cloven hooves and thick fur. While centaurs held the lower body of a horse, staglings held the lower bodies of large elk, both sporting large antlers or pronged horns and the long, furry ears of the animal.
I see I did not smell incorrectly.
Roich said with a gentle smile, his long elkin ears flicking idly.
And I hear the hoofbeat of the centaur. Do you know who visits us, Captain Jot?
Jot nodded, his thick, ruddy beard bouncing with emotion. I believe it's you, Your Grace. He may be waiting for a noble's retinue to meet him. Shall I summon the guard?
No need.
Roich said with a chuckle, reaching out of his own furred muff and patting Jot on the shoulder.
All of you stay here. I will go meet Warlord Yule myself. If anything happens to me, be sure to get everyone to safety.
Jot looked unsure, but nodded, collapsing his spyglass. Aye, it will be done.
What the fuck is that?
Hayden Story said, raising his rifle and training his long glass optic on the figure coming down the road. Yule clicked his tongue at the human, speaking to him in English. Hold your fire. If you can make out what it is, describe it.
Hayden
murmured in English, squinting an eye.
To be frank, boss, it looks like a fucking deer with a face. He also seems to be wearing a tea cozy on his head.
What do you mean it looks like a deer with a face? Yule said, snatching the rifle away from him and putting it to his eye himself. Mackerat sneezed wetly, made an open sound of disgust, then shivered.
Stagling, Yule. They're called staglings. They're like centaurs, but have the body of a deer.
What did she say?
Hayden asked Yule as he handed him back his rifle.
I still haven't gotten a hang of the local Tunka.
Yule chuckled. She said they're called staglings, and I believe that might be their mare or something. He switched to Tunka. Thank you, Mackerat.
No problem.
Mackerat chattered out, her eyes squeezed shut as she shivered.
Can we go back to the wagon yet?
Of course not, Yule said as he turned around and started walking backwards, gesturing towards the other senior NCOs. Pick it up in step. Keep it tight. Forward! The call rang out, but Yule turned around, stepping gamely across the snowy road with the lone wanderers and Mackerat following after him. Yule trudged down the road with the teeth-chattering Mackerat behind him until they were within 25 yards of the stagling, and he raised his hand in greeting. Good morning!
Your accent is awful,
Roich said with a cheeky grin, which pulled a short laugh from Yule. Yule stepped forward the rest of the way and held out his hand, which stumped Roich for a minute until he took it and shook it when Yule started the motion. I'm Yule, Yule said, releasing the stagling's hand, and this is my 1st Combined Arms Battalion. We're making our way towards the Wheaton area. Roich bowed forward slightly, nodding his head.
Ah, I see. I am Roich Greenspine. I am the alderman of this town. Noble, if you will.
This town isn't on any maps. We were surprised to see it here. Yule said, tucking his hands into his pockets. Roich placed his own hand back into his long, furred hand muff.
And we were surprised to see so many banners marching our way. Is it war you bring? My town cannot put up much of a fight, I'm afraid.
Oh, of course not, Yule said, frowning. I don't come to invade, just meeting with a delegation of the Sermnians in Wheaton.
Oh, it's you they're after, is it? While our town was under construction, we have heard rumors they were coming this way, but we have heard little else over the cold.
Roich said with a soft smile, then took a few more steps towards Yule.
Though I must warn you, the road beyond us is under some construction as well. Orcs felled many old trees and used them to cut a large trading convoy in half, leading to an ambush, and heavy snow has been hampering their removal.
Yule reached up and pinched his nose, breathing out his words in a pained sigh. The road is blocked, you say?
Until the fur crews from Heartwood can set back off. They were afraid to stay out long when a late blizzard nearly took them to their graves.
Roich said apologetically, but then gestured towards the buildings hidden in the trees.
However, I am more than happy to bring you and your men in. We have both inns and multiple bunkhouses that were used to accommodate our workers.
Were used? Yule asked, then turned, gesturing to his senior NCOs to get ready to move. Where are the workers? Roich chuckled.
Probably back home in Berfin. I am only a minor noble of the Staglings, you see. But I was able to lean on my people to get this town built very quickly. Paid by Queen Madmarine, of course. She funded this new trade road open quickly, and we were designated to be an in-between for those traveling north.
Queen, eh? Is she a good queen or a bad queen? Yule asked him, stepping off with Roich as he began to slowly walk back towards town. I found royalty to be a bit of a toss-up as of late.
She is hard-handed, but fair. Her husband has been in a coma for years now, and I think the stress is slowly making her harder than she used to be.
Roich said, but there was an air of pity on his voice.
She is not bad for a valley elf, and treats us Staglings with dignity, but she is becoming jaded, I believe.
Yule nodded, keeping his hands tucked in his pockets as the lone wanderers and the sniffling Maccarat walked behind him, translating what he was saying to the other humans who were having problems following. I can understand how that is. Is she becoming jaded due to having to work the office alone, or is there something else going on?
The loss of the Riverlands hurts her dignity a fair margin.
Roich mused, raising a hand and waving to a dwarf that had been watching them from the tree line.
And it has done nothing but grow her hatred of the orcs. Our army was always small, and she's becoming frustrated with it still, as her citizens would rather grow food and tend to their orchards. Losing nearly 18 villages and towns was a heavy blow, and I fear it has done nothing but nurture and feed her growing bloodlust.
Yule kept this notion in mind, his brain already buzzing with the calculations and possible military outposts he could set up here in this northerly region. Is she aware I'm coming?
I would wager so,
Roich said, then turned towards his town again, his pronged horns casting an odd shadow on Yule's own.
But this is Lim's story. We had raised her at the start of last year's melt, and fully built before the following Rodoli was even beginning to think of ending. It was difficult, and trade has been extremely slow due to the weather, but we are holding strong. We have 5 inns. There is the Green Limb, the Glowing Hearth, the Puking Bee, Hackorms, and the Weeping Maple. We also have a few shops and an apothecary, but it's mostly space to accommodate the residents and traders.
Yule slowly picked up his step to his full stride, not caring much for the slow stride of the stagling next to him. You mentioned orcs and raids. Have you had much of a problem?
Not in such a way. We have a small garrison of 30 home guard,
Roich said, and picked up his own pace to match Yule's.
They mostly raid the roads going north, closer to the lake.
The buildings were just beginning to come into focus through the trees when Yule coughed into his hand, then spat into the snow before he turned to Roich. Would you mind if I sent some men out to see about those trees? We can clear them quite quickly with explosives, would save your woodsmen some time.
We would deeply appreciate that,
Roich said, then turned his head when the sudden, simultaneous thump of feet leaving the ground reached his ears, and they perked upwards as he watched the entire infantry column of Yule's first cab step off, banners fluttering brightly against the white snow. Yule heard the stagling stop and turned, a smile breaking across his chapped lips as he observed the stagling watching the infantry column march forward, Erinda Caine's authoritative voice barking out the time. "Ain't it something?" Yule said, then chuckled as Roach took a step back, as if instinctively wishing to flee from the marching men and women. "You should see it when we have the tanks rolling with us. Anyway, can you show me around your town, Elderman?"
No, Dane, look at them all.
Pearlie said with wide green eyes, watching the column of Yule's first cab march around the S-bend road that led into town, weaving through the thick trees that acted as windbreakers.
And they all brought coin. Is this his entire army? What kind of man brings this as a personal guard? Do you think this is an intimidation thing?
I think the hairy one there has the coin.
Cruin said, ignoring the rest of the questions and gesturing with his smoking pipe towards Yule.
Knowing the descriptions, I would bet my teeth that's you.
Pearlie's blonde locks of hair tumbled out of her hood when she pulled it back, giving her head a soft shake as she looked to Cruin.
How do you know it's not the one called Coco?
Coco has a bigger nose, and is shorter. Merchants always describe how hairy Yule is, and that he rarely smiles.
Cruin muttered, watching as Yule nodded appreciatively to the council building Roach was pointing to.
Coco was always smiling and laughing. People like him more than Yule.
Pearlie blinked down at Yule as his troops marched by, and she waved happily to a few halflings she saw riding in wagons that had odd, leaning tube-shaped objects in them.
Oh, look, Rowan, there's other halflings. Oh, there's even a Tatar. Oh my, he has nearly every race in his army.
And orcs.
Cruin said dangerously, his eyes landing on the well-painted face of an orc renegade, bow over his back and debut rifle at shoulder arms.
Why would he have orcs in his ranks? And southern elves, too. Does he not know he lets in snakes that coil at his feet?
Pearlie frowned prettily at Cruin, still waving down at the soldiers marching past with the other villagers who had come out to see them.
Honestly, Crew, not all of them are bad. People can change, people can grow. Are we not all flowering within the eyes of Rhodos?
Cruin harumphed at a laugh of non-approval, so Pearlie just turned her back to him, watching one wagon in particular. This one had a valley elf with red hair, and as Pearlie tilted her head at the woman, she saw that the bright snow made her eyes shine red as well.
A blood touched. Here. Is that Alavara?
Pearlie said quietly to herself and nearly leapt out of her coat when the woman's head snapped around to stare at her from where she sat in the wagon. Pearlie wavered, her hand muff hiding her panicking hands, and she quickly ducked inside the green limb, bouncing off the door frame in her haste to get inside. Yule breathed out a happy sigh as he brought the tankard of ice-cold ale away from his lips, smacking them approvingly while Alavara smiled indulgently as she sipped her wine. Yule had picked Hackholm's Inn to house himself and his command, while he made sure the bunkhouses were the first to be filled by the troopers themselves. He knew there would be spillover, and only one of the inns was not bursting at the seams with rowdy soldiers with access to both tables, hot food, and beer that didn't come out of a frostbitten can. Hackholm's was a breath of fresh air to Yule, and reminded him greatly of an old-fashioned saloon mashed with a hunting lodge. Hackholm themselves turned out to be an extremely young Goliath woman that suffered from lack of height, only coming in at a below-average 6'3". True to her race, she was a rugged, handsome-faced woman that smiled and laughed with teeth as bright as moonlight, and Yule found that the lone wanderers quickly became smitten by her. Oddly, her hair was thickly corded and gray, running down her back in chunky tendrils, while her eyes were a sparkling gold that set out heavily against her dark ivory skin. She sang as she worked, and it seemed that his fellow humans would quiet down nearly in a hushing wave as she did. Alavara did not appear to be impressed, only snuggling up beside Yule and warming her long overcoat body with deep, rich wine. Once they had eaten, the rest of the humans chose to stay downstairs and listen with dreamy eyes to Hackholm, though Yule decided to retire early with Alavara. Chikily was right behind them, as was Mackerat, who had consumed such a large amount of Unger fire liquor that she was starting to sweat. Yethis was still enthralled with a group of lone wanderers telling her about the 1990s of Earth and didn't even notice Yule leave the main dining area. Yule and Alavara took their bed. Chikily flopped down onto a large couch while Mackerat curled up on a Sentry sofa, an angled day bed that faced the door. Yule knew that Roich would come calling tomorrow and sought to have a full night's rest when he did. Alavara was thankfully too tired to cause him much bother, though her habit of tucking her hand into a rather personal place did not seem to die down in the slightest, nor did her idly moving fingers. It wasn't until Alavara fully fell asleep that Yule could do the same, and no goddesses came to bother him either. When he awoke in a warm room, and it was an odd relief for him to also have no one else laying on him again. While he had made it quite clear to his fellow tent occupants to leave him alone, there was more than one night he woke up in the morning to find either Erinda Caine hugging his leg, Yethis fully tucked into his side, or Ryozo attempting to use Chikily as a teddy bear. Yule swung his legs over, remembering that while this inn didn't have a need for chamber pots, it still didn't have personal bathrooms. Only a washroom with community toilets. When he was dressed and relieved, though the washroom was not heated and made for a chilly visit, he came down into the main dining and relaxation area. Hackholm was there, having relieved her night clerks, and waved to him while yawning.
Morning, Your Excellency.
Not a noble, not a warlord, Yule reminded her chidingly, taking a seat at one of the saddle stools that ran along her dark chocolate-toned wooden bar. But waking up in a proper bed was a treat. Hackholm laughed, her voice lovely even this early in the morning. She pulled out a hot pot of berry tea, one of the few fresh teas they can make year-round due to their proximity to frulberry thickets.
I don't doubt that in the slightest. No matter how comfortable one can be on the ground, it stands no match for a soft cushion and a thick comforter. Nor can it make up for hot tea brewed in a kettle or hot food made in a kitchen.
How did you guys even afford to build a town like this so quickly? Would have taken months to get all this furniture made, or at least shipped here. Yule asked her, taking the warm mug of tea and just holding it in his hands for the heat.
Oh, that's all due to our Roik, little lord that he is. Father was a beam of the Hormel crown.
Hackholm began, but stopped when she saw Yule's eyes start to glaze over from having to learn more racially created titles.
Sorry, my dear. A beam is like a powerful clan that serves a royal house called a crown. They take their name from the parts of an antler, you see.
Yule leaned his head back in understanding, leaning backwards as he did. Oh, now I got it. All right, so he's like the son of a duke or something.
Sure.
Hackholm murmured, not knowing what the fuck a duke was, but assumed it was some kind of human royalty.
Anyway, Roik served well under his father, and despite how he may look or sound, he is a vicious duelist. 3 orc Luigian have fallen to his sword and horns, and it made him quite popular in the many royal houses. War cannot last forever, though, and he became bored in peace. He volunteered to lead a new town, and partially paid for it from his own coffers. Hired nearly 3 villages worth of craftsmen to build it as fast as possible. Called it the snow jewel of the new merchant road.
Yule took a sip from his mug and still found it a tad too hot, setting it back down the bar top. You guys are a ways out here, and all alone. Seems a bit of a bad idea to be so isolated.
We weren't supposed to be. A small fort is to be made in the coming spring, which will house a proper garrison.
Hackholm said, pulling a rack from her apron and wiping down the bar.
Not to mention none of the soldiers showed up on time. They've been delayed the entire way because they keep having to help out other towns and villages.
Yule made sure to glue his eyes to the back of the bar. Hackholm may have been small for a Goliath, but the swagger and swing of her chest said she was plenty large to get him whacked by Alavara if his eyes drifted. Were you guys hoping the snow would keep the orcs back?
Worked well enough so far, didn't it?
Hackholm said with a smile, then snorted when she saw Yule was keeping his eyes well trained along the bottles racked along the wall, and she leaned down on the bar.
Baker's Ash, you can look, you know. You think I wear this dress for the ventilation? Keeps you stupid men at my bar drinking and tossing down coin, if just to catch another glimpse of my mountain range.
Yule twisted his eyes to Hackholm's, only to catch a gander at Hackholm's broad, cheeky smile and her even broader cleavage. He grimaced, then brought his tea to his lips. From Earth to Scapira, you women never do change. Hackholm cackled evilly, then took a tray from one of her morning kitchen staff, setting it down in front of Yule.
What's the point in being a woman if you can't make men blush and women stare at you with violence in mind? Fruit ormal, bread, butter, and I think this is boo-roo meat.
Ormal. Is this like a grain? Yule asked, looking down at the heavily buttered burgoo-looking substance in the bowl. What is a baroo?
Just eat it and be happy about it.
Hackholm said as she slapped her rag over her shoulder, then hauled a fresh wooden keg up into a holder with a single hand. Roich came for Yule just as he had finished his third mug of tea, and Yule set off with him, bundled up in his thick coat despite the fact Roich appeared to be wearing something far lighter.
I had my treasury go over the amount, and the security payment you sent us for lodgings was overcounted.
Roich began, smiling to a group of children that went walking past, their arms full of tenderwood and small logs. Yule waved a hand at him. Keep it. I'm sure you'll be needing it for my lads break something. Do you have the map I asked for? Roich said, pulling a sleeve of paper from his hand muff and holding it out to Yule.
8 logs are still in place, the smallest being 5 feet across the center, and you are right, our woodsman checked how they were felled, and it sounds exactly like these explosives you spoke about.
Yule unfolded the paper and frowned down at it. The orcs had, more or less, severed the road into 8 sections, each a mile apart. I can have my EOD and demolitions troopers take care of this. How long did you say it would be for the snow to lighten up?
Snow is melting, albeit slowly, during high sun. Perhaps your fagans can pass in 4 days or so, 7 at the most.
Roich said with a tilt of his head towards the people standing on the porch of a general store and sipping tea from mugs.
The snow is refreezing overnight, and it would make use of your fagans quite treacherous. Not to mention your horses are suffering from cold grip and need to rest. They are not as hardy as your centaurs.
Yule ran a hand down his beard, rumbling in his throat as he thought. 7 days stuck in this town would be an absolute thorn in his timetable, and he planned to arrive far earlier than the Serbian delegate. At this rate, they may even arrive before him, something that made him rather annoyed. He had plenty of money to take care of the stay here, but it was not where he wanted to be. It was cold and snowy here, and the harpies already had to have their taloned avian feet constantly wrapped to avoid frostbite, not to mention the general fatigue the rest of his troopers were suffering from the chill. As Yule waved goodbye to Roich after being shown the many warehouses and the smaller stores, he heard a rush of wings behind him and braced his back. Chikily landed on his shoulders with the same force of a naval jet hitting a catch wire, and Yule stumbled forwards a few steps with a low chuckle.
Chikily reporting from scouting.
Chikily said happily, wrapping his wings around Yule's head and nuzzling his face into Yule's winter cap. Yule reached up and rustled Chikily's brown, tawny hair, and turned when he heard another pair of avian feet land in the snow with a soft crunch. Eris, how were things? The hawk harpy shook her black and brown hair free of snow, then grimaced.
Chikily still flapping too much, not using air currents.
Eris say she not tell.
Chikily hissed at her, and the two narrowed their eyes at each other.
Eris promised not to tell Yule.
Yule had learned that the common harpies fell under a multitude of varieties, separated from the others for their lack of cohesion. Chikily was a sparrow harpy, their faces round, friendly, and wings nearly always brown and black. They were related to the hawk harpies, who were also brown and black in feather, but their eyes were far less friendly, far sharper, and were generally far less genial than the sparrows. Jays were brightly colored little bastards that were always the worst of the thieves, snatching away food and bread with a whoosh of blue, red, or yellow feathers. There were other smaller clans such as the Robin Blues and Yellow-Winged Tannies, but they mostly kept to the wilds, only showing up in towns and cities on the rare occasions the younger harpies were curious. They were not different enough to be called uncommon, such as the owl and Himalaya harpies, but didn't seem to mind it much.
Chikily know not to fly too hard or too high.
Eris hissed back at Chikily, and she bared her sharp teeth at the sparrow harpy.
Always disobeying Yule, causing problems, hurting wings. What Chikily do if not able to fly, eh?
Chikily fluffed up the accusation of causing problems for Yule and bared his own fangs.
Chikily not making fuss for Yule. Chikily follow orders, same as Eris.
All right, you two. Relax, Yule said, placing one hand ahead of Chikily and the other on Eris's. Both of the harpies seemed to deflate, and Eris closed her eyes happily. What all did you see? Chikily wiggled his cloth-wrapped talons as he spoke.
Chikily see camp smoke, way off over curve. Big snowfield hills, forests spread out like open wings.
Eris agree. Smoke way away. Maybe 6-day march in good weather.
Eris agreed, sidling up closer to Yule and getting out of the wind that grabbed at her hair.
Eris think it toward Orklands, far to west.
Chikily nodded his head, also shivering now that he was not moving.
Lots of smoke. Several large camps, maybe? Not small campfire.
You two head back to the end. Get some warm food in you, Yule said, but Eris was holding onto his hand with her wing claws, pressing it down onto her hair.
You have lunch with Eris and Chikily?
Eris asked him, eyes looking up at him with a tone that tied on a please to the end of her sentence. She would never admit it, but her favorite time of day was eating with Yule and sitting shoulder to shoulder. Well, elbow with him. She had favored these moments ever since the sparkling unicorn.
You're always so busy to eat with Eris anymore. Not since Kabli Valhalla.
Yule looked down at her wing claws holding onto his hand, and knew he was beat. He shook his head a little, then gave her hair a few scritches with the tips of his fingers. All right, fine. We can have lunch.
Snow is very cold.
Eris said quietly, looking down at her foot wraps, but smiled happily to herself when she felt Yule scoop her up into an arm. You two are so needy, Yule muttered, but had to fight to not smile as both Chikily and Eris giggled around him. And that's the end of Chapter 3 of Veilrider Book 4, Strength of Spirit. If you like the story and others like them, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel of Guard Bros Field Desk. As well as tell your friends, tell your other Discords, tell your other D&D buddies about this series. If you think they'll like it, show it to them. Fuck it, why not? Fucking just send it. And of course, a big shout out to our members. These people get early looks at chapters, sneak peeks. They get access to the members only channel where I post artwork in progress and the final picture before I put it anywhere else. But, the first shirts, they pay $50 a month and help keep the channel running, help keep the VAs employed and working with me still. That goes to Emachino, Cody Jero, Death Dancer, and Insane Medic. You guys are doing a lot for us. And looking at it now, Death Dancer and Insane Medic have given over $1,000 each to the fucking channel, and they are anyone who donates. So with YouTube, they don't give me anything. I don't get paid by YouTube. I'm too spicy. I'm not base enough. I don't know. They don't pay me. So I'm literally kept going by the donations of you guys, whether it's via donations or buying patches, whatever it is. I'm kept running, and I help pay the VAs by you guys. YouTube is doing nothing for us. That's just how it is. But a big thanks to my first shirts. Next up is the E4 Mafia. That's Splug the Goblin, Snitty Enjoyer still here. All right, good to see you, Snitty. Dark Side, Kiwi Bastard, Lacuna 8, Josh Beatty, Matty Boy, Flash of Green, and Crusader 0625. The E4 Mafia pays $25 per month, and they, again, like the first shirts, are keeping us rolling. And then, of course, a big thanks to everyone in Snuffy Squad. And knew it this time, I'm going to read them out. Henry DM, Dalek, Jules, Blonde Lord, Thrace Vega, Devin, Sean Holtz, Andrew Ingill, Yeti Potato, Skelters, Chiro, Classy Cthulhu, Ranger Uninspired, Diesel Dog, Coffee Commander, Anto, Inquisitor Matt, Duncan D, and Ein the Loresmith. Huge thanks. My throat's all raw now. Big thanks to all the members. You guys are doing way more for me than YouTube ever could. Fuck YouTube. Piece of shit. Fucking Twitch was going to kill. I hope either Twitch or X makes a new video format. I swear to God. Anyway, until we see you next time on this side of the veil, that was Rue, that was Mech, that was Vynn, that was Hailey, there's Aristic Rider, Simba, Fire, Amanda, Eliza VTuber, and this is Garbro's Field Desk. We'll see you next time.